2, 1. Hello and welcome, the first in the series of the Possible Rift Runners podcast. We don't know if we're going to do more, or we haven't sort of decided a name for it, but we just figure out if anyone actually wants to listen to us speak about rubbish for about half an hour. So anyways, I have Noge and Zykor. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello!
I'm Noge, I'm me, I'm better than Seatin.
My name is Zykor,
Just clarify that.
and I am a DPS tank-ish.
You're a DPS tank?
Yes.
I'm not too sure. Just sort of knocking about in the middle. Okay, and also with us we have Antipathy from the MMO Champion forums. Give us a shout, Anti.
Hey yo!
Okay, so today Andy's going to be asking a few questions about sort of endgame raiding, and since me, Noge and Zykor don't leave the house much, we have experienced all of it, and we'll be here to answer the questions. So, Anti, if you'd like to take it away with your first couple of questions then.
Alright, thanks guys, I appreciate the time Parabellum has put into this, and I just want to take you through a few questions, some of which are about raiding, others are about the state of the game in general. But first of all, before we get into raiding questions, because that's your forte, I just want to ask you, what do you think about Treon's very active release schedule when it comes to patches and content? You're a top rating guild, you do raids all the time. How do you feel about how quickly or how slowly the raid content has been delivered to you?
Okay, so I'll take this one first. I believe, since we're one of the top guilds, I really don't know how we got there. We're always sort of striving for progression, so we do tend to get through the content pretty fast. I mean, we've had Infernal Dawn on farm for about 3 months now. So at the moment, it's just doing the same old, just trying to get sort of the gear ready for Storm Legion. But in the past, I mean, Hammernail, there were a couple of months, but I think what they've done to sort of fill that gap, which is quite nice, is brought out a new 10-man every sort of to fill the time in between. So, that's kept us occupied. Don't know about you, Noge and Zykor, what do you think on this?
I like always bringing out content pretty quickly for, endgame raiding, but with problems towards that is sometimes it's not always bug-free and up to scratch.
Yeah.
And, if they're bringing out new content every 3 or 4 months, when we go, obviously we're the first guilds to go in, and we do see a lot of bugs that, you think that could have been handled better if they spent a bit more time on it.
Yeah, also adding on to that, as a perspective of looking at it from a raiding, as a hardcore raider myself, the content itself is really, I mean, in my opinion, it's quite easy. And, you can progress through it quite fast, like we said. How the problems arise, like the content previously produced. Once they implement a new content, the previous content seems to get messed up, and the sort of thing they intend, they don't seem to go back and work on it. They sort of fix something, and there's another thing slightly broken. Like, for example, Mailforge right now in 1.11, they sort of brought out 1.11, but Mailforge encounter, which is the final encounter in Infernal Dawn, is currently sort of broken, and I don't think they'll go back to it anytime soon. So that's one of the key issues about bringing out content really fast.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
well,
I mean, go on, Antipathy, sorry.
No, it's just, I wanted to say, I mean, you raised some very interesting issues here. I mean, first of all, we're talking about buggy content and buggy release, but I mean, it's a vicious cycle. Mainly what happens is that we have top-end guilds raiding in the betas and in the PTS, and they kind of give feedback to Treon, who was supposed to take that and incorporate it into raiding. And then we also have another element, which is that the content sometimes isn't fast enough, or, I mean, as you guys mentioned, it might be a little bit too easy. I just want more of your feedback on that. Do you really feel that the content is simplistic in comparison to, let's say, other MMOs out there?
I wouldn't say HK was simple at all, but if we're talking about the endgame content now, ID compared to HK is, the step is just huge in difficulty backwards. ID's really simple. We were out gearing it, and we could kill 3 bosses in a day literally when it was released. With HK, you're lucky to get a kill a day. So they're definitely with ID and the endgame content now. They've moved to a more simple difficulty, I guess.
Well, it was one of those. Yeah, go on.
Okay, I think what happened sort of ID was there wasn't a very big step up in gear. It was only like a couple of stats, if that, between the hammer nail and ID gear, which led us having pretty much, well, the equivalent to ID gear when we entered, whereas sort of let's say Green Scales, Blight and River of Souls to hammer nail, you know, there was a massive stat increase, which meant that, you know, you had to go in and then keep on trying until you met the DPS to kill Medantex and get a bit of gear off him, and then you had to slowly progress through the instance. You also had the massive cock block of having the focused debuff on Achilleos, which meant you had to farm hammer nail for a few weeks before you could, one, have the focus and hit to kill him, and two, have the DPS to kill him, because, you know, when he first came out, pretty much everyone had to have the full set to make the phase 1 soft DPS check.
One of the things which is great about Tron is, compared to other game MMOs, is, you know, they tend to release content really fast. But yeah, as we said, it's a good thing. And when you were looking at the endgame content, they seem to, you know, because of the speed at which they release, they seem to nerf the harder content quite quickly, if you want to say, for the people that, you know, the aim is to pretty much make sure that everyone can have a chance to play the endgame content, which can have a negative effect on the people that really want to play hardcore and really have a challenging content, as, you know, it's pretty much quality over quantity, if you want to say it like that, after HK so far, as we've seen.
I think you guys raised really fantastic points. I just want to build on a few of them, just very quickly. A lot of the community actually in Rift has not seen ID. They have not been to Infernal Dawn. So if you can just talk about that, kind of explain what Infernal Dawn looks like, what the encounters are like. I think it's very intimidating, probably because a lot of guilds haven't been able to clear Hammer now, especially with Achilleos being, you know, as you said, a cock block. The other thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you feel about the fact that Treon is actually making content easier as you go along? Is this the kind of trend you want to see in the long run, or are you happier to see it become progressively more difficult?
Well,
I mean, you know, I'll just kind of quickly. You know, eventually content's going to be nerfed down, just so, you know, everyone gets a chance to see it. But I don't think content should be nerfed down until, you know, the next tier of raiding is out, to give, you know, everyone a bit of a challenge to do and progress on. Or, you know, it's just no fun if you get everything handed to you on the plate.
You know,
go on, Zykor.
You know, one of the things we're trying to implement in the future, because, you know, they want everybody to take part in their raiding content, but in the future they are going to put in hard modes, which is only targeted for the hardcore progression races out there in guilds. And this is actually a good idea to think about, because right now it's just, you know, clearing content and then nerfing it immediately after it's done. So it's sort of like racing to clear everything before they nerf it. You know, it's just one of those things. It's kind of annoying for the hardcore raiders out there. So one of the things, it's a great idea right now, is for the hard modes itself. And you wanted to know about the boss encounters in the Infernal Dawn, right? Well, like Melforge, for example, is the last boss of ID, and it's got interesting mechanics. But to be honest, comparing that encounter to Achilleos at first was way more difficult than Melforge. Melforge itself, the only critical point where a raid can actually wipe is if it comes down to one or two people, you know, just derping to something to react to within 5 seconds, which is a green bubble which spawns every now and then, which is kind of predictable in a way, because you know exactly when it's set timers. So to be honest, you know, anyone can pretty much kill Melforge, because in rage time itself, it's impossible
non-existent
to reach. Exactly.
I think the main problem with Melforge is that it wasn't a very fun fight. I mean, you didn't sort of get the satisfaction when you killed Achilleos. I mean, you know, it was, you know, find the dragon of fire and all that, but it just wasn't a very epic fight. And this was probably because the last phase, instead of, you know, jumping about the platform, dodging lava waves. There's a safe spot that you can stand in where you just completely ignore the waves, and it just doesn't make it very engaging.
Yeah, it just means you could on half the fight basically and stand there and DPS, so it is quite boring. But the earlier bosses in ID, I would actually say some of them are definitely easier than Achilleos. So if people, I think you said that people haven't even cleared HK. There are actually, especially the first boss in ID, I think a mid HK guild could kill that. So it's sort of a mixed tier raid. The endings, there's no really hard mechanics in there, but it does get slightly harder as you go on.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a bit of rating actually from the the top end of this podcast, but the next thing I want to talk about here is some of the classes. You guys are some of the top end people, and you know classes inside out, and this is a question that a lot of people have all the time. There are so many combinations in Rift that you can play, whether you're cleric, mage, warrior, or rogue. And what I would like to know, and so many people out there would like to know, is what is an acceptable threshold for DPS difference? I mean, are you guys okay with, for example, a Defilemancer going into a raid doing 500 DPS more than, let's say, a Pyromancer, or is that not acceptable for high-end raiding builds? How do you feel about the differences in DPS between the different specs?
You can go.
I'm trying to say this one. Don't say this one. I mean, on progression raids, when you first get into the instance, you sort of want everyone performing to the maximum they can. So you want to, we basically, in the progression race, only tolerate people who use the sort of very high-end specs, just because we need to push those little numbers, need to get the top performance, need to squeeze every bit of DPS we can out of everyone. So, we really push for the most complex rotations used by our members, and if some people can't do that, there have been cases, where we have to, pull them aside, have a chat with them, and say, this might not be the guild for you. But, that's just the kind of raiding environment we're in, where it's very, very competitive, and, everyone's trying to stroke their egos and, get world first and everything. But yeah, go on, Noge.
When you said about the numbers, sort of, between the top end spec and someone coming in with sort of a mid-range spec. If you get a top end spec, then we expect you to perform with it. You can't just come in and say, I can play this spec, and then be average at it. That won't really get you very far when you're racing for a world first. So if you're going to play these top specs, which you have to in our guild, we do expect you to be 500 to 600 DPS higher than other players who actually play that spec in some cases.
Adding on to that, there is some exceptions. Certain players aren't able to maximize DPS in comparison to other raid performances that are required, such as doing the mechanics itself. Certain people need to do mid-range spec in order to be able to play properly. There's sometimes in a raiding environment, especially in Rift, it's a struggle to get 20 exceptional players. One of the things which hardcore raid guilds strive for, but the problem with that is not every single player in the raid can play for the maximum potential that the raid leaders expect them to play to. So sometimes we need to to deal with the fact that people can only play mid-range specs and not the top end specs. But as long as they're within that gap of 200, 300 DPS from the top DPS, it's fine. As long as they they are able to do the encounter without messing up or dying. As long as they contribute 100% throughout the fight, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah, as long as they're not restricting us from killing the boss by playing them specs. We expect you to be doing the best you can so we can actually kill the boss.
Okay, that's fair enough. Since it's a progression based and you're shooting for competitive world kills, I can imagine that you'd want to take in some of the higher end specs. But what about afterwards? Let's say, for example, bosses on farm. Do you guys entertain the idea of players coming in on their mid-range specs and just kind of having fun and letting loose, or is that would that actually deter from your ability to kill the boss again?
I mean,
Seatin, you.
Quickly. No worries. The first few times you kill the boss again, say like the second and third time, you know, we probably use everyone in their full DPS specs just to make sure everyone's comfortable with killing it again and getting it down. But once sort of bosses go on farm, you know, talking like fourth, fifth time we've killed them, I mean, we let people sort of try out new specs that might be a bit better. Maybe they've like spent all night playing around with a spec variant and they want to test out, see how it compares to other specs. And you know, we're up for that, but if we have sort of everyone doing that, then it just sort of leads to a bit of a manic and, you know, nobody's playing the right specs, so we don't have enough DPS to do it. But you know, certainly there's a bit of room for, well, there's always room for fun. We have a good laugh and joke about and that. I mean, the end of the day, we play the game for enjoyment, just like everyone else. We just like to have a bit of competition in it as well.
So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Rift and fun do equate.
Indeed!
Okay, so let's keep talking about Souls for a minute. You know, Rift has really driven home the concept of the support class. We see this now in Chocolate Rift, and we're also going to see it coming forward in Storm Legion. We're going to have 2 of the 4 souls introduced, being the Tactician and Defiler, for example, being core souls that are support-based, and they really do have, in my opinion anyway, some significant utility in raids. Let's talk first about the current state, Chocolate Rift. We're winding down this version of the game, and the question here becomes is, how viable have support souls been in raids? Which have been the most viable? And how has their performance been all around as it relates to, you know, your attempts to kill bosses and get them down?
There are crucial points. There's 2 crucial, pretty much, in Chocolate Rift.
Support.
Yeah, 2 crucial support builds out there. No classes we usually bring is Archon and Bard.
Do you want to get your words together?
Yeah, brother, listen. So,
okay.
Out of the mages, we bring the Archon, and the rogues bring the Bard. Now, as you can see, we're talking about Vanilla Rift. I believe that's what you mean by Chocolate Rift.
It's Chocolate Rift, not that. I don't know.
That's what
this
Dev's
Vanilla
call
Rift
hit
is.
me.
Yeah, so one of the crucial things about Archon is the Flaring Power. Flaring Power is one of those things which is kind of unique to Archon itself, which none other support build had in Chocolate Rift. And its auras and the specific debuffs it had, which, you know, the Bards did not have. So these taken into account is such a boost when it requires the tight DPS checks, and of course healing and cast time itself. You know, like the Archons are one of those things that you must have in every single encounter when it comes to progression, and pretty much any farm raids as well. But the Bards, when you talk about Bards, you know, they bring that support of, you know, slight healing, but usually they're sort of like the buff to the raid of additional buffs which gives, you know, to the players, such as, you know, DPS, damage and all that. But yeah, those 2 are pretty much to me.
Yeah, I mean, you probably can go without them, but the sort of buffs that they provide make them, using one of them, a lot sort of larger overall performance increase than, say, having the person DPS. Okay, so yeah, pretty much covered that. But
rogues, they provide motives.
With the chain to BM, BM's Beastmasters, sorry, have gotten the same sort of buffs as Archon, so it's essentially now an either or between Beastmaster or Archon. You can have either one of them, and they pretty much almost provide the exact same abilities and buffs, with the exception of Lava Field, I believe.
Yeah. So that's another thing we got. There's only really 2 support classes in the game at the moment, but I think every class is going to have support, soul, and then expansion, or close to it. So it's going to be a bit more interesting.
So going forward, we've got the Tactician and the Defiler. Defiler, of course, absorbing and redirecting damage. I think those links. I was really impressed. I mean, if you guys watched the Soul Reveal last night, they talked about the fact that you can actually link a player, and then the link would take place after mitigation, but before absorbs. which means that from my reading, I mean, if I was in a hardcore environment, I'd probably want that class in almost every raid. And then you have the Titian that has this ability to kind of, drop totems. I use that in quotes. And also they have the ability to AoE heal and AoE DPS to quite a very nice margin. So what's your take on both those classes? And do you feel you're going to need them going forward?
The Defiler, I think we're going to have in every single raid. Looking at it, it's just such a buff towards, tank damage and stuff. I don't see any reason why in any encounter we won't go without it. So yeah, it's really, you're going to have a Defiler in every raid by the looks of it.
There's no reason not to have it.
Yeah, but with the Tactician, I'm going to be honest, I don't know much about it, but I haven't seen anything major that it gives. Someone else might know more about that, but it doesn't look anything special. It just sort of looks like a heal DPS, bit of a boost on buffs, but nothing that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah. I'll just carry on from there. Yeah, we had a bit of a discussion about the Tactician, and it just doesn't seem like there's going to be room for it in the raid. It just doesn't seem like a worthy support class to have, if I'm going to say that bluntly honest. I mean, the Bard is much more efficient. It doesn't really provide any buffs to the raid. It sort of does subpar damage, subpar healing. You're better off just having either a rogue DPS instead of that. And the way it heals is mostly through, I believe, cone channeled abilities. So even if, we did get one, everyone would sort of have to be stacked up to fully benefit from most of its healing output. So, and that would sort of very limit the way that we stand in the raid and our strategies. And so it just doesn't seem like it's going to have a place in Storm Legion high-end raiding.
Okay. That's fair enough. I mean, it seems to me like it's a very fun class to play, to be quite frank. I had a 39 rogue, I transferred onto the beta and I just tried it out, and those flamethrowers are quite cool. But I do agree with you to a certain degree that it might not be the most viable spec, and it might not be a need to bring into a raid. But I think maybe, we might be getting ahead of ourselves. The beta is still ongoing and we might see more changes. But as it stands, I would probably agree that maybe the Defiler is the go-to class, but the Tactician may be something that you kind of, consider bringing along.
Yeah, definitely. I'll do that.
Okay, let's go forward here. Some of the biggest things that Rift as a game has been criticized for has been the grind, the insane grind that people keep talking about. And, of course, the buggy/broken content, so to speak. My intention is to kind of sort of talk about those and see whether those myths have been true or if they're just kind of, over-embellished fantasies by other players. So, I want to hear your take on that. You're a top-end rating guild. You did beat the content when it was current at launch. You beat it when it was a Tier 2, and you beat it at Tier 3. How big of a grind was Rift for you guys back then, and how broken, so to speak, was the content as you experienced it in each tier?
Okay, so I think there are two separate questions here. Firstly, let's start off with how broken the content was. I mean, when sort of River of Souls and Greenscale's Blight came out, there weren't too many major game-breaking bugs. I'm just trying to think of a few that there was. There was a lot of bugs with Greenscale actually, sort of spawning additional plants.
You could cheat Greenscale and get an easy kill on him.
And he would just stay flying in the air, and also with the bubbles not spawning, and tons of stuff like that. But that wasn't too bad. And moving on from that, we had Hammernail, which was absolutely spring-loaded with bugs. I reckon every boss had an individual, some sort of game-breaking bug. Like, for example, Medantex, I remember the puddles wouldn't spawn, which would basically make the fight tank and spank. And you had stuff like, I'm just trying to think, Rune King and Prince broken for weeks and weeks until they managed to fix them. You had the Zealous Laser constantly spinning around, cutting up the raid, and just loads of stuff.
Well, one of the things which I believe try and were working from the start is obviously Storm Legion. I believe they were working that even before they even released. You know, they mentioned about this ages ago. Like even before they released Hammer now, they were working on Storm Legion. So I don't think you know they were really putting in all the work into the raid content that is currently in Vanilla Rift or Chocolate Rift. And you know, even when progressing in ID, there was a lot of bugs. For example, Lathius, the piles, they never really spawned, or you know, just didn't disappear. Sorry, they spawned but didn't disappear.
Yeah.
And that was really
Took them
annoying
far
when
too
it
long
came
to
to
that.
when it came to progression, which you know, it really did put a lot of guilds off. And Lathius itself is a really difficult encounter for most guilds. That you know, most guilds did break up because of that fight for some reason, and you know, it was really it's dependent on the class itself. You know, required competent mages to do their job correctly. And you know, in a game like this where the player base is really small, you can't get players you know that are competent to do that job. But yeah, Lathius definitely was one of the major bosses in ID itself.
Lathius was so badly tuned when it first came out. I mean, you know, we lost Voodoo in like the first day because they deemed it impossible, which at the time it was completely impossible. Later, you know, Addiction, when the enrage timer got increased by a minute, then Addiction managed to kill it. There were also several nerfs in between that, with a few of the damage and also orbs spawning. But yeah, it just wasn't tuned at all well, and it was just totally unkillable, which, you know, just puts you off.
You could say they are releasing content really fast, which is you know, you could say it's really good. You know, other MMOs don't do it, but you know, when it there's an obviously negative side to it where it puts people off when they're trying to do something that's kind of difficult in their perspective. And when it does break guilds, it's sort of like that's not the aim of Tryon, you know, Rift itself. It's not the aim to, you know, make it annoying or frustrating for players. But it's something which, you know, does happen if they want to release content fast.
Okay, I have my fraps is off. Don't know why. So I'm just gonna find out where we ended it, and then we'll start it again.
It's all on my
It's
all on my stream right now.
It's on yours. Oh, brilliant. Okay, we can just continue then.
Okay, go on then.
Go. No, I can't. I'll be on my PC later. Anyways.
That tournament was on FIFA 13.
Sorry for the technical content.
I'm sorry at the moment experiencing slight technical difficulties. We will be back short to this announcement. Don't say something.
Anyway,
I need to cut all this out.
Please join Parabellum, one of the top-end EU rating guilds, found on Blightfield EU.
there we go. I have that message.
Are we on dead air now, or is it still
I'm
recording?
not sure.
No.
See
I don't know why it's so fucking... Ah!
Wait.
Exactly being angry.
we're still
It's
on
actually
air.
going really well, by the way. I'm like on the edge of my seat. It's actually really interesting. You guys are giving some very nice answers here.
It's not mine. Have you ever raided yourself?
What?
I was a heavy-duty raider back in WoW on one of the world top US guilds. I just kind of gave up on Warcraft a long time ago, and I've been kind of casual, social, and Rift for ages now. I mean, I love raiding, I really do, but it's just the commitment to raid has kind of floundered with my career. Has kind of gone down a little. But yeah, I mean, if you ever tell me, hey, you know, are you available with Scooter Raid, I'll never say no.
Ah! Fuck you! It's just...
Sort it out.
Yeah.
Okay, well, give me a sec.
But yeah, we're still live on air on my side.
Yeah, nobody cares about it. It's over there. How long was that?
Well, I can edit it to like the start and finish, but that's pretty much it. I can't edit in between.
Find out where
You'd
I
have
am.
to do a part 1, part 2 or something.
Okay, I'm just gonna see where I am. Just be quiet for a second. Just 1 second.
I don't know. Neil got there. Yeah, A-star something. Yeah. No, you don't say. Yes. Yeah.
Totally honky, honky, honky. Honky,
A-star,
honky,
5 A's,
honky.
Okay, we just finished talking about Voodoo, and my mic was terribly low.
What?
I don't know. We need to find a better way to do this.
That was good.
It's all on my thing right now. I can just edit it.
We've got part 1 on Zykor stream. So did
Okay,
you
we've got
Zykor
part 1.
stream?
You can just do part 2 on my stream. I just have to like.
Yeah, we'll have a bleep, right? Okay, so we'll have that until I go, oh shit, and then we'll have a bleep and then a bit of a, like, oh shit, and then we'll continue from part 2. It ended on a fairly easy note. We were talking about Lathis and how it's unkillable and everyone got really mad and pissed off. Okay, so, do you want to start again then?
Go.
Okay, we're starting from picking up. So, Auntie, just ask us a question and we'll go from there, okay?
You watch news, Rowan?
Let's go in, Auntie. Okay, I'll just do it quickly. Okay, so we're back. Just speak for a second. Okay, so we are back. Sorry about that. I totally failed on the recording. But yes, moving on. Auntie, next question, please.
Okay, next question, please. A lot of you have MMO backgrounds. This is kind of a bonus question here for you. If I was to ask you right now, comparatively speaking, how is the rating Rift in comparison to other MMOs in terms of difficulty and content? If you can answer that in, like, let's say 2 sentences, what would you say? Go.
Okay. I believe I'm the only one with a raiding background from other MMOs. Am I wrong?
Me.
What have you got raiding background from those?
Warcraft, DBC, and Vanilla. But I stopped
Oh, you
in
weren't.
Wrath.
We didn't raid him well.
I stopped in Wrath.
Okay, you go. You cover this one.
Well, okay. Well, the only real raid that's actually I classed myself as difficult would be Hammerknell. I think you can compare, Hammerknell with some of the harder raids in Warcraft. Whereas ID and the starting range GSB and River of Souls are a bit, I won't say they were easy, but I think comparing them to some of the, famous raids like Molten Core, Blackwing Lair in Vanilla WoW, they're definitely not as difficult and not as epic, I would say.
Yeah, but I think after that they sort of learned that lesson, the raiding isn't epic or difficult, and then they brought out this absolute beast which was Hammerknell, and that just, I can honestly say, I raided in WoW for about 4 or 5 years, from about the start of Burning Crusade to the start of Cataclysm, and just no raid sort of has the feeling that Hammerknell did. I mean, I did Oldar, and I'd say Hammerknell is just above Oldar in terms of epicness. I mean, the first time you walk into the Achilleos room, and you start the fight, oh fucking hell, this is an amazing encounter. It just absolutely blew me away at the time. Thought it was brilliant. But yes, I believe that Hammerknell is the best raid ever. Zykor, you got anything to add from your...
this is my
Nothing.
this is my first MMO, so speaking of perspective of a first-time raider, I definitely say Rift is the easy game in comparison to games that I've played, but obviously not MMOs.
Oh yeah.
But
So you mentioned this is your first MMO, Zykor. What were you doing before this?
for this,
Anything
Yeah,
involves
where have you
nukes?
been? What rock have you been under?
well, I've pretty much been producing YouTube content on a different game, which is not suitable for this podcast because it consists of a lot of violence and a lot of Rift players will be offended by it, and I believe it's not suitable for this nation, as Obama would say.
No, don't bring a bomb into this.
Yeah, he too.
He's been making COD videos on his console.
He just wants a bowl with him.
I'm pretty much from the console. This is gonna be first time playing on a PC as an MMO. So yeah, it's a great experience to see people in the virtual world and how to interact in raid environment. How people get emotional. It's pretty good. It's pretty good indeed.
Emotional.
It's good stuff.
Emotional.
It's good a lot of emotions,
Yeah,
determination, dedication, and often
Yes.
banter. Oh, you're always good for the banter. You know, the guild
yeah.
banters where there's always competition and people shouting at each other in the forums, trolling. It's really good.
Okay,
Probably.
alright, fine. I mean, this is going the kind of places where, you know, I don't know where it's going,
Yes,
but
pal.
let me just ask
Leave it
this.
alone.
It's a bonus question for you guys, alright? Another one of those bonus questions. There's a big myth about top-end rating guilds, you know, no life, no nothing, just kind of, you know, bashing through content and trying to down it all the time. Let me ask you, and let's be honest here, how accurate would you say that kind of a question is? How much of a no-lifer do you have to be in order to be in hardcore and, you know, end-game world-competing guild? Or is it just one of those myths where you can just kind of like be one of those people who takes a vacation, you know, when new content is introduced, beat the boss, and then go back to your work and there's no problems?
I think I'll this one with a sort of personal coincidence that I had. Before the release, or well, just after the release of Hammer now, I broke up with my girlfriend at the time. Well, she broke up with me. And just after the release of Infernal Dawn, my girlfriend at the time broke up with me. So, you know, I'm saying there's a bit of a correlation going on there with the release of new content and the failure of relationships. And due to having such an extensive knowledge of endgame raiding, females don't come about as often as I would like them to. But, you know, I'd say you kind of put certain things before real life. Like, I mean, I got invited out with a few friends tonight just to like go around there and play some Xbox. Which, to be honest, I don't really want to do, so I just said no. So, you know, it's sort of priorities you prefer. I mean, you know, I like to stay inside and play Rift all day, and that's what I like to do.
Well,
But I do have a job, and Noge has a job as well as an apprentice.
Yeah.
And Zykor as fuck all. He stays all day masturbating and playing Rift.
well, you know, I'd like to add on that we've also been called names from other guilds, like, you know, we've been called we're Swedish kids who live in the basement sort of thing. You know, that adds to the fact of this question is that
Not Swedish.
exactly, you know,
well,
some
we've been called that.
yeah, some people did call certain people that. Anyway, moving on to this question, I like to say there's certain sacrifices that had to be made, you know, because this is, you know, raiding in Rift is sort of like, you know, raiding in the MMO. You're given a schedule, you're given a time which you need to show up in, and if you don't show up in that, the raid leader will pretty much take that into account, and then, you know, it's sort of consequences you have to face within the game that you enjoy playing, and that sort of thing, you know, where you don't get loot or DKP, whatever system you play with, you need to deal with that. And obviously, if you want to be in a hardcore raiding environment, you gotta make the sacrifices. If you know, people call you, you know, if your parents, like if I'm a 17-year-old, so I got parents that obviously I need to meet parents at the same time. I gotta, you know, play the game that I want to play hardcore. You know, meet the time schedules and raids. And obviously, sometimes I gotta deny some of the things that my parents say. You know, I can't like go out. You know, I can't go out to dinner and stuff and shit like that. So, you know, these sacrifices gotta be made, and sometimes it does ruin everything in the real world. But at the same time, you enjoy every single minute of it by raiding and Rift. So, you know, balances out.
Yeah.
I mean,
think you
sort
just
of,
build, like I say, you just build a sort of a priority system with, you know, the release of new content. A lot that'll just come before most things in real life.
I think it certainly depends on sort of the relationship you have with sort of your fellow guild members. I mean, if you enjoy playing, which, you know, I absolutely love playing with all of these guys, then, you know, you're happy to sort of ditch your other friends or other duties outside real life, if, you know, you're having fun and enjoying the game. I don't know really where I'm going with this, but basically, you know, if you're having fun, do what you like.
But, you know, downside to all of this is when you take
What
a step outside after playing a lot of MMO, you sort of feel like shit, you know. So, you know, that's one of the downsides.
I don't.
Yeah,
I remember when we first killed Achilles, I ran around the house like topless
Yeah, but that's
for
not
like
going outside,
2
is it?
hours. I had a buzz of an adrenaline. I wanted to like hit a door. I swear, like when we first killed Achilles, I had the strength to punch through a concrete wall. I did not want to try it, because it would lower my PS if I injured any one of my hands.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, but back to the question. I think you can still be in one of the top guilds and, you know, not play all day. We have a lot of people who are sort of, you know, raid loggers. They'll just log on raid and then log off. But I think you do have to have a certain level of dedication, you know, to put new content, progression rates before things in real life. I think that's what it comes to. It's your priority system and what you choose to do.
Well, I think I mean, that's kind of an enlightening answer, and I really want to thank you guys because that level of honesty you don't really find anywhere else. It's seriously quite an interesting response to hear, but there you have it. You can actually kind of raid, and it's worth it. And I was going to ask you this question: is it worth it? Yes or no? But I think most of you have actually answered that by saying yes, that it is, and I can understand that.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, we have a good time, and you know that's what life's all
Killing
about.
bosses, getting world first, get an achievement. All of this matters, and when your name pops up as a shard message, you know, it's great. What?
Yeah, I don't think we've had that much world first success, but you know, we're up there.
We're aiming for it. We're aiming for it in Storm Legion, right,
we're
guys?
aiming for it.
Yeah!
Yeah, we're doing it. We're doing it. We're not doing too bad, but
Second or third, I think.
We are prepared. We got the secret weapons that no other guild have. We got.
We are third or second by default.
Yeah.
That's because the whole
We got a
no
chance.
incident. But we're not going into the whole no quarter power stone stacking exploiting thing today. Okay. So got any more questions, Rusty? There.
I just have one last question, and then I'll let you guys go. The last thing I want to hear, and I think most people want to hear this, especially people who haven't tried Rift or want to try Rift. What has been your favorite encounter in this game, and what has been your least favorite encounter in this game from a rating perspective? And just, you know, one answer for each, for both of you, and just a very quick why it's been your favorite and why it's been your least favorite. Go.
Seatin, you go first. I know what you're
Okay, I'll take this. I think we had a bit of a chat about this earlier, and I think we all pretty much came to the conclusion that Achilleos was the best encounter. Just because, you know, it's epic, you know, you find a fucking giant squid, jumping platforms, dodging waves, there's just so much to deal with, and it just completely, well, before the nurse, it just overwhelmed you so much, and there was such an absolute buzz of adrenaline, awesome feeling when you finally first killed it, and you know, that's you can't beat that feeling.
Yeah, a quick point.
And going to my least favourite, I don't know, I'd probably say this is just from personal experience, which was General Slogan, something like that, in Rise of the Phoenix. Just because I had to basically spend like a few nights on that, just dispelling for hours and hours, and I just hate dispel mechanics, so they're constantly chucking dispels at you, and you just have to keep on clicking on people and dispelling, and it just gets a bit mindless after a while, and it wasn't really enjoyable. I can see from like a DPS or healing point of perspective how it'd be fun, but it just wasn't fun for me at the time. But anyways, on to you, Noge.
Oh yeah, I was going to say a quick point as well. My answer for my favourite boss is going to be the same. It's Achilleos. If anyone hasn't played the game, just go and watch a video on YouTube, and I think you'll see why. It's just a really amazing encounter. For my least favourite boss, I'm going to go simply personal preference. I don't like Immoor Darktide. Second to last boss in HK. I just don't like splitting the raid up, and the way you have to track two different sides of the fight at once. And there's nothing really challenging. It's just annoying. The mechanics are just a bit annoying. There's nothing that makes the fight interesting. It's just long and boring, and yeah, it's a bit of a annoyance. Well,
personally, I prefer. Achilleos is a fun fight, fair enough, but the current content I love the most currently is hard mode Maclemos. That's one of the encounters which
Are you trolling?
No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Achilleos is the best encounter, right? And the least favorite one, in my opinion, is Inquisitor Garo from Hamano. which is pretty much a standstill derp fight where you know, it's only a certain set of classes which requires something to do, where
What?
you gotta get the warriors to keep running back and forth for the porters and stuff, you know, at the
what
time
about
when you
that?
gotta progress. And it's sort of like it's a standstill dirt fight because you gotta just kill
what time?
porters left and right, and it's predictable and when exactly they're going to come with stupid
why
add-ons
that?
available in the game and people just used. And you know, it's just a really, really long and boring fight at the time it was available. And you know, now that everything's nerfed, you know, sort of alright. But at the time, it was one of those things where Tryon was sort of like, okay, you know what, let's just put this boss in because it's just there, and he needs to fill in this spot as the 11th, you know, one of the 11 bosses. But you know, overall fight is just a boring concept for making it so long with repetition of the same mechanics from the start with nothing new to it. But yeah,
I
that's
think
pretty
it's
much
all
it.
that first aiders.
Okay, so I think that's everyone summed up.
Yeah, I mean, the summary for me is basically fights with repetitive mechanics or fights with predictable mechanics basically out of the window. And I'd say that's fair for pretty much any MMO. And yeah, thank you guys so much. There have been some very enlightening questions. I'm sure so many people want to understand how the end game rating perspective of one of the world's top guilds functions. So thank you.
No worries at all.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for putting the questions together.
Top guild, brothers, top guilds.
He said one of the top guilds, and considering the fact that there aren't many guilds.
Why are you just being harsh? There are many guilds, many social guilds, but you know, not very many hardcore raiding guilds.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the end of it then. Thank you for watching, and we will see you whenever we decide to do another podcast, because we're not too sure if anyone will actually like it. But yeah, thank you for watching.